He thought she was just a maid, until he saw what she was hiding at home. Aria Coleman had always been seen as just a maid, walking through the glass hallways of a powerful company in Seattle. Beautiful, dedicated, and invisible to the elite. She hid talents and secrets that could never be imagined by those who underestimated her. On the other side, Daniel Harrington, a cold and arrogant CEO, lived surrounded by wealth but was empty inside, believing he had control over everything and everyone. The meeting of these two distant worlds sets off an intense plot of injustice, revelations, and transformation. Between painful falls and moments of resilience, fate places before them choices capable of changing their lives forever. And when the hidden truth comes to light, nothing will ever be the same. Before we dive into this story, I want to make a special request. Leave a comment saying where you're watching from. I'd really love to know how far these stories are reaching. And if you enjoy love stories full of emotion, twists, and heartwarming endings, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't just follow every new story, but you'll also help this space grow and keep bringing you narratives that touch the soul. The light rain in Seattle was still trickling down the skyscraper windows when Aria Coleman reached the 34th floor. She calmly pushed the cleaning cart, her bright yellow uniform spotless, standing out against her medium ebony-toned skin. Her curly, well-kept hair was tied in a low bun, showing off a delicate face with large, attentive brown eyes. There was something elegant in her posture, a quiet dignity that didn't ask for permission to exist. Even so, the expensive badges that passed her in the hallway barely noticed her presence. She checked the time, took a deep breath, and started polishing the glass dividers. On the other side, meeting rooms displayed screens with colorful charts and English terms she silently mastered. As she passed by, she greeted the receptionist on the floor, Riley Chen, with a slight smile. Riley returned the gesture with a shy wave. A few steps ahead, two analysts stopped their conversation when they saw her. "She's way too pretty for that uniform," one of them whispered, not caring if he could be heard. "Shh, let it go," replied the other, giving her a once-over with barely disguised curiosity. Aria pretended not to notice. She had learned, the hard way, to turn comments into air. She cleaned the steel handrail, adjusted the strap of her simple bag where she kept a small Bible inherited from her mother, and kept moving. The yellow fabric looked like a ray of sunshine in the gray hallway, and for a few seconds, distracted eyes paused on that brightness. The elevator doors opened with a beep. Daniel Harrington appeared, flanked by two directors, tall, fair-skinned, with perfectly styled brown-gray hair. His suit fit like armor on the CEO's figure. His gaze was sharp, almost clinical. He strode down the hallway with long steps, speaking quietly but firmly. "We need an answer by end of day." "No excuses," he said, not slowing down. "Of course, Daniel. The product team is aware," replied the VP, Carla Davenport, trying to keep up. Aria stepped aside with the cart to make room. Daniel passed within a meter of her and didn't lift his eyes from the tablet. He didn't see the yellow, didn't see the glow, didn't see the woman. Only the role. Only the invisible one who made sure everything in that world of glass and steel kept shining. "Good morning," Aria said politely. By reflex. Silence. The meeting room doors closed behind the group. The cleaner stood there for a moment, holding the damp cloth, feeling the weight of being ignored and still choosing serenity. She went back to wiping the fingerprints from the doorknob, as if erasing the small daily violences the building insisted on collecting. In the lounge, two interns were whispering near the coffee machine. Miguel Alvarez, nervous, was fidgeting with his phone. His co-worker, Cara Simmons, was observing discreetly. "Did you see how she carries herself? That yellow?" "Wow," said Miguel, trying to sound complimentary but coming off shallow. "She works better than half the floor," Cara replied bluntly. "And in a uniform better than our blazers." "Yeah, but..." "You think Daniel notices? He doesn't notice anyone, only results." Aria poured herself a glass of water and gave the pair a soft smile, which they responded to by looking away, unsure of what to say. She rinsed the sponge and returned to the hallway, where decorative plants added a bit of green to the concrete gray. As she approached the main meeting room, she overheard fragments of a tense conversation. "The European investors asked for contract adjustments," said Carla, impatiently. "We'll do it." "And fast," Daniel replied. "There's no room for mistakes, not today." The sound of the words passed through the glass door and reached Aria, who recognized terms and accents invisible to anyone who expected nothing from her. The yellow uniform caught her reflection in the glass. Straight back, head held high. Her fingers steady, ran the cloth in a constant rhythm. A security guard approached. "Could you avoid this hallway for a few minutes?" he asked, not rudely, but with the authority of someone who carries the house on his back. "Of course," she replied gently. "I'll come back when the meeting is over." As she turned, she passed Riley again, who was carrying a pile of mail. "I like your lipstick," the receptionist whispered. "Thanks," said Aria, lightly touching the subtle color. "Just a nude." "Lasts all day." Suddenly, a high-pitched laugh rang out from a nearby desk. Two employees, known for their strong perfume and sharp tongues, were making snide comments. "If I had that body, I wouldn't wear that highlighter yellow," one said, laughing. "Yeah, draws attention." "But in the end, she's just a cleaning lady," the other replied, like closing a sentence. Aria stopped. Her eyes darkened for a second, but her voice came out calm. "Excuse me," she said, "to pass with the cart." The two fell silent, surprised by her firmness. As she walked away, one rolled her eyes, the other cleared her throat, uncomfortable. The clock ticked closer to 9. Daniel's office door opened again. He walked to the break room alone, looking for coffee. The silence between steps seemed to calculate the next deal. When she saw him coming, Aria moved to clear the machine. "Can I wipe the tray first?" "Someone spilled sugar," she explained simply. "No need," he replied automatically, pouring himself a cup without looking. His phone buzzed. "Yes, I'm listening. Send the draft." Aria picked up the sticky sugar grains and tidied everything with precision. Daniel was already heading back to the hallway when, for a moment, he felt something. Maybe her soft perfume, maybe the flash of yellow in his peripheral vision. He paused, glanced sideways. Their eyes met for half a second, his cold, hers firm and polite. "Thank you," she said simply. He gave a slight nod and walked away. It wasn't much, but in that half second, the invisible tide moved a single grain of sand. As the doors closed again to the world of power, Aria resumed her work, certain of two things. Not everyone would see her, and even so, she would keep on shining. The clock read just after 10 when the hallway filled with urgency. Doors opened, papers were grabbed, and a group of directors headed to the glass room where the most important meeting of the month would take place. Aria Coleman, still collecting the last cups left on desks, was quickly called to clean the support area before the investors arrived. She entered quietly, her bright yellow uniform standing out against the blue-gray carpet of the meeting room. As she arranged the tray of glasses, she felt the weight of several suspicious gazes. The room was charged with expectation. Carla Davenport, the vice president of operations, a white woman around 45 years old, her blonde hair tied in a stiff bun, navy blue suit impeccable, and heels steady, was flipping through documents impatiently. Upon noticing a brown stain on one of the pages, she raised the paper dramatically. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed loudly, looking up at the room. "Who spilled coffee on the reports?" Silence fell over the table. A few eyes automatically turned toward Aria, who still held a damp cloth in her hands. "You," Carla pointed, walking over to her. "You were just cleaning here, weren't you? It couldn't have been anyone else." Aria, surprised, looked up, her breath short. "Excuse me, ma'am, but when I entered, the documents were already on the table. Don't make excuses." Carla cut her off, her voice firm, loaded with authority. This kind of carelessness jeopardizes a multi-million-dollar deal. Aria felt her heart race. The weight of all those eyes fell on her, some with pity, others with contempt. She swallowed hard but didn't lower her head. At that moment, the door opened. Daniel Harrington walked in, accompanied by two foreign investors, tall, imposing, with cold green eyes. He stopped in front of the scene without understanding what was happening. Carla, seizing the opportunity to assert her power, wasted no time. "Daniel, look at what we found. The cleaning lady ruined the printed reports for the meeting. This kind of negligence gets in the way of the company's success." Daniel glanced briefly at the stained page, then looked at Aria. His tone was curt, allowing no room for defense. "Be more careful next time. We can't afford mistakes." The words hit her like stones. Aria felt her throat burn, but she didn't let a tear fall. She kept her shoulders straight, her brown eyes locked on Daniel's, transmitting something he hadn't expected: strength, dignity. "Understood, sir," she replied calmly, yet firmly. "I'll be even more attentive in my work." Carla lifted her chin in triumph and returned to the table. Daniel, however, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Aria's gaze, which should have lowered, remained upright and steady, as if it carried a truth no one there cared to hear. Something inside him, almost imperceptible, registered that silent strength. The investors sat down, the meeting began, but while Daniel spoke about projections and numbers, he still remembered the intensity in the eyes of the woman in yellow. And that detail, no matter how much he tried to ignore it, would stay engraved in his mind. Outside the room, Aria left with a heavy heart. She walked down the polished hallway, feeling the sting of humiliation, but didn't let her face break. She took a deep breath. That injustice wouldn't erase her essence. The building was nearly empty when Daniel Harrington left his office. The clock read 9 at night, and the typical Seattle drizzle tapped on the windows. He walked through the quiet hallways, his tie loosened and his face tired, when an unexpected sound made him stop. Soft voices came from the break room, mixed with gentle laughter. Daniel frowned. At that hour, no employees should be gathered there. He approached slowly and, before pushing open the cracked door, he heard a cadence he didn't recognize at first. La liberté commence là où l'ignorance s'achève. The pronunciation was clear, melodic, flawless. Intrigued, Daniel peeked through the gap. Aria Coleman sat in a simple chair, her yellow uniform slightly wrinkled from the long day. Her loose hair fell in dark waves over her shoulders, softening the firmness in her face. In her hands, she held a book in French. In front of her, 3 young employees, Miguel Alvarez, the anxious intern, Riley Chen, the receptionist, and Kara Simmons, a junior analyst, were listening as if they were in front of a respected teacher. "Repeat after me." Slowly, Aria asked patiently, "Je crois en moi." "Je crois en moi," the 3 repeated, laughing at their own accents. Aria smiled, a bright smile, so different from the seriousness she carried through the hallways. "Very good. It means I believe in myself. You have to believe in what you're saying. Language can tell when the heart's not in it." Daniel stood still, a discomfort growing inside him. How could this be? The woman who hours earlier had been blamed for ruining documents was now reciting French literature with the ease of someone educated at top universities. He walked in without thinking. The door creaked, and the small group fell silent. Miguel stood up quickly, nervous. Riley's eyes widened. Kara tried to hide the notebook where she had been jotting down words. Aria looked up, surprised, but remained calm. "Good evening, mister." "Harrington," she said in English, her voice steady. Daniel scanned the room, trying to regain his composure. What's going on here?" he asked, keeping the cold tone he used in meetings. Riley answered, embarrassed, Aria was helping us with French. We have a presentation for Canadian investors." "And," Daniel interrupted, turning to Aria, "you speak French?" Aria slowly closed the book. "Yes, Kakana, sir. I speak French, Spanish, and a bit of German." The silence grew heavy. The young employees looked at each other, tense. Daniel adjusted his blazer, trying to hide his reaction. "And why? Why would a cleaning lady speak so many languages?" he asked, more to himself than to her. Aria held his gaze without flinching, because studying was never a privilege, but a necessity, and because no one can take away what I've learned. There was a moment when Daniel's eyes met hers. He saw something beyond the yellow uniform. He saw the fire of someone who carried knowledge, dignity, and a story that couldn't be told in glass hallways. "I see," he said finally, short, turning toward the door. "Carry on, if you'd like." He left the room, but his steps had lost their usual firmness. The echo of Aria's voice in French still resonated in his mind, and for the first time in years, Daniel Harrington found himself shaken, not by a contract, not by a negotiation, but by a woman he had once deemed invisible. Inside the room, Aria closed the book and took a deep breath. She knew that moment would change something, though she couldn't yet predict the storm that was coming. The next morning, the atmosphere in the company was more tense than ever. The main hall buzzed with preparations. The French investors had arrived earlier than expected, and the hired translator simply didn't show up. The receptionist, flustered, was going from desk to desk with the news. The directors exchanged nervous looks, and Carla Davenport, the vice president, gestured angrily. "This is a disaster," Carla exclaimed, adjusting her navy blue suit. "They only speak French, and the meeting starts in 10 minutes. What are we going to do?" Daniel Harrington entered the hall at that moment, his expression stern, though the tension was clear in his green eyes. "We'll find someone." "We can't afford to lose this deal," he said, trying to stay in control. Aria Coleman, who was quietly cleaning the side windows, heard every word. Her bright yellow uniform reflected the morning light, but no one noticed her. She took a deep breath. She knew she could help. She also knew the risk, stepping in front of a room full of executives who already looked down on her. But within her, dignity spoke louder. She took a step forward. "If you'll allow me, I can translate," she said firmly. Everyone turned to her. The silence was immediate, almost uncomfortable. Carla laughed sarcastically. "You? Translate? Please, Aria, this is no time for jokes. This requires professionalism." Aria kept her gaze steady, not backing down. "I can lead the conversation. I speak French fluently." Daniel hesitated. The memory of the previous night came back in flashes. Aria reading in French to the others. Her perfect pronunciation. The calm she radiated. His eyes locked with hers for a moment. There was conviction there, not arrogance. "Let her try," he said, surprising even himself. Carla's eyes widened. "Daniel, this is insane. It's an order," he replied curtly. A few minutes later, the investors walked in, middle-aged men in dark suits with firm handshakes. The eldest of them, Monsieur Laurent Dubois, began in French. "Nous sommes désolés pour le contretemps, mais nous espérons que cette réunion sera productive." Everyone around the table glanced at each other. Aria, calm, translated immediately. They apologize for the delay and hope this meeting will be productive. Daniel raised his eyebrows. Her voice was clear, elegant, and without hesitation. The conversation moved forward. The Frenchman spoke quickly, detailing clauses, numbers, expectations. Aria followed with ease, conveying every nuance in English, then returning Daniel's replies in fluent French. The entire room seemed entranced by how naturally she moved between both worlds. At one point, one of the investors made a subtle joke, full of cultural double meaning. Aria smiled before translating. He said doing business in Seattle is like dealing with the rain. You can't run from it. You just have to learn to walk patiently. The room laughed. Even Daniel, always reserved, let out a small smile. For the first time, he wasn't looking at Aria as the cleaning lady. He saw a brilliant, intelligent woman saving the company in a moment of crisis. At the end, Monsieur Dubois extended his hand directly to Aria. "Votre aide a été précieuse. Merci, mademoiselle." She shook his hand firmly and translated without losing her humility. "He said my help was invaluable." Daniel watched in silence, feeling a knot in his stomach. Every move Aria made was a cruel reminder of how wrongly he had judged her. And along with the shame, something new was born, restless, almost dangerous, an admiration that was beginning to cross the professional line. As everyone left the room, Carla couldn't resist a jab. "Don't get used to it, Aria." "This was just a coincidence," Aria replied with a calm smile. "Coincidences don't always choose who gets to shine, Miss Davenport." Daniel stepped closer, his voice, for the first time, sounded less cold. "You saved our meeting today. Thank you." Aria nodded respectfully, but her eyes conveyed something he couldn't quite read. "I only did what needed to be done." As she walked away, the yellow of her uniform seemed even more radiant under the corridor lights. Daniel stood still, feeling a strange heaviness in his chest, the beginning of a transformation he didn't want to admit. That night, Daniel Harrington couldn't focus on the reports stacked on his desk. The image of Aria Coleman translating with ease, leading investors with impressive confidence, echoed in his mind. There was something about her that went beyond logic. Against his own instincts, he grabbed his coat and headed down to the parking garage. He saw Aria leaving through the building's side door, carrying a simple bag on her shoulder. The yellow uniform, now a bit worn from the day, still seemed to shine in the dim, rain-wet street. Daniel waited a few seconds before following her in his discreet car, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. The route took him far from the bright downtown avenues. With each passing mile, the mirrored buildings gave way to narrow streets, modest homes, peeling walls, and dim street lamps. Daniel had never been to that working-class neighborhood of Seattle. Here, the city he ruled from his glass tower seemed like a different place, made of ordinary people, quietly fighting their daily battles. Aria entered a simple house with a light blue facade and white curtains in the window. Daniel parked a few meters away and stayed in the car, struggling with the discomfort of spying. But something inside told him he needed to see who she really was. The thin curtains allowed a glimpse inside. He saw her drop her bag, let her hair down, and the tiredness in her expression was replaced by a warm smile. A young woman appeared next, similar skin, big eyes, but a fragile body bound to a wheelchair. "Good evening, Lily," said Aria, leaning down to kiss her sister's forehead. "I was waiting for you," the young woman answered softly. "Will you play for me tonight?" Aria chuckled quietly. "I promise, but only if you sing along." Daniel held his breath as the two moved toward an old piano against the living room wall. The wood was worn, but the yellowed keys still made music. Aria sat down, placed her delicate fingers on the keys, and began to play a soft melody. Soon, her voice rose, clear and angelic, filling the room with an emotion impossible to ignore. Somewhere over the rainbow, she sang in English, her voice sweet and powerful, as if made for grand stages. Lily sang along, smiling, and for a few moments, the wheelchair disappeared. The music transformed the humble room into a temple of hope. Outside, Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had never imagined Aria like that. An artist, a devoted sister, a woman with a powerful soul. The contrast between the grandeur of her voice and the simplicity of her surroundings hit him like a silent blow. He leaned his forehead against the steering wheel, trying to understand what he was feeling. Shame for having treated her as invisible. Admiration for witnessing hidden talent. And something even deeper, a stirring he didn't want to admit. Aria wasn't just the cleaning lady who had helped in a moment of crisis. She was extraordinary. The music ended with the soft laughter of the two sisters. Aria hugged Lily and said, "One day, Lily, I'll take you to hear a grand concert. But for now, this is our stage." Daniel drove away slowly, starting the car in silence. His heart beat faster than in any negotiation. He now knew that this woman carried secrets powerful enough to shake the glass walls of his world. The following days seemed quiet on the surface, but something was brewing underneath at the company. A multi-million-dollar project was about to be presented to international investors. A tech expansion proposal that could place Daniel Harrington's company at the top of the market. Everyone waited anxiously. On the morning of the presentation, the company's servers suffered a critical failure. Confidential documents vanished, contracts were corrupted, and sensitive information ended up in external inboxes. The board rushed into an emergency meeting, and tension filled every hallway. "This was sabotage," one of the directors shouted. Someone from the inside sabotaged the system. Carla Davenport, always lurking, took advantage of the chaos. With a hastily prepared dossier, she pointed to a supposed security camera recording. "Look here. Someone entered the file room last night. That bag, that uniform. It's the maid, Aria Coleman." Shock rippled through the room. Daniel looked at the screen and saw the silhouette of a woman in yellow walking past the camera. It wasn't clear, but it was enough to spark suspicion. "This is way too serious," Carla said, crossing her arms. "How are we going to explain to the investors that the cleaning lady sabotaged our files?" Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. Deep down, a voice screamed that Aria wasn't guilty. He remembered the night he followed her, the care for her sister, the angelic voice. But faced with the board's pressure and the urgency of protecting the company's image, he wavered. "Bring her to me," he ordered, his voice hard to mask the inner conflict. Shortly after, Aria entered the meeting room. Her uniform was impeccable, hair tied back in a bun, her eyes steady despite the tension. She knew something was wrong, but she had no idea of the storm waiting for her. Daniel stood up. "Aria, there's been a sabotage of company files. All evidence points to you." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Me? Mr. Harrington, I would never touch anything in this company. My job is to clean, not destroy." Carla seized the moment to strike. "You were in the file room last night. The cameras show it clearly. Don't try to deny it. I was there, yes," Aria admitted, taking a deep breath. "But only to collect trash. There were disposable cups everywhere. I was just doing my job." "We don't have time for excuses," one of the board members snapped. "We need a decision now." Silence fell over the room. Daniel looked into Aria's eyes. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She stood tall, as if dignity was her last line of defense. His heart ached, but his mouth said what it didn't want to. "You're fired." The words fell like blades. For a moment, Aria's breath faltered, and her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't break. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "If that's what you believe, then I have nothing more to say. But know this, truth always comes to light," she said, her voice steady, even as her world crumbled inside. She left the room under judging stares and poisonous whispers. As she walked down the hallway, the tears slipped quietly down her face. Still, she kept her stride firm, like a queen refusing to lose her crown. From the mezzanine above, Daniel watched her. Every step she took was a blow to his conscience. Deep down, he knew he had committed an injustice. But it was too late. Outside the building, the rain fell in a fine mist. Aria stopped in front of the revolving door, looked up, and whispered through tears, "I'll never let myself be humiliated again." The image of her yellow figure disappearing into the cold night burned into Daniel's memory, like an open wound. Winter passed, and life inside the company returned to its cold, impersonal rhythm. Daniel Harrington never saw Aria Coleman again after the dismissal. And yet, there were nights when the silence in his penthouse was filled only by the memory of her voice, singing in French, and the weight of that injustice he didn't dare confess, even to himself. In the spring, Daniel was invited to a charity gala at one of Seattle's most luxurious hotels. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers, tables adorned with white roses and embroidered napkins. The city's elite moved through the space in glittering gowns and tailored suits. Daniel walked among them as always, impeccable, distant, but more restless inside than ever. On stage, the MC announced the evening's honorees. Business people, philanthropists, and artists were applauded as they took the spotlight. Daniel was engaged in a mechanical conversation with an investor when he heard a name that froze his blood. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest of the evening. A woman who turned her pain into hope for countless young people. founder of a social project focused on education and music in the working-class neighborhood of Rainier Valley. Please give a warm welcome to Aria Coleman." The entire room turned toward the entrance. Daniel looked up, and for a moment, the world stopped. Aria appeared, descending the grand staircase. Her black hair flowed in glossy waves under the lights, her skin radiant against the stunning red silk dress that hugged her curves with elegance. There was no more yellow uniform, no trace of submission. What stood before everyone now was a radiant, sovereign woman who walked as if the floor had been laid out for her. The room gave her a standing ovation. Carla Davenport, also present at the event, pressed her lips together, trying to mask her discomfort. Daniel, however, couldn't hide his shock. Impossible. He murmured, barely audible. Aria walked up to the stage. She held the microphone firmly and looked out at the audience with calm confidence. "Good evening. A few months ago, I was just an invisible employee, cleaning hallways that didn't belong to me. But I've learned that dignity doesn't depend on where we are. It comes from the strength we use to keep going. Today, alongside my sister and some amazing young people, we've built a place where music and knowledge are transforming lives." Respectful silence filled the ballroom. Some women discreetly wiped away tears. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. Every word she spoke hit his conscience like an arrow. After the speech, as guests lined up to greet her, Daniel tried to approach. He crossed the ballroom with measured steps, his heart racing in a way it hadn't since his youth. At last, he stood in front of her. "Aria," he said, his voice quieter than he'd intended. She looked him in the eye without lowering her head. There was no hatred in her gaze, but there was no submission either. "Good evening, Mr. Harrington." He took a deep breath, swallowing his pride. I didn't know you had done all this. Your work is admirable." Aria gave a reserved smile. "Maybe you never cared to know." The silence between them weighed heavier than any music playing in the hall. Daniel realized that, standing before this woman, his wealth and status meant nothing. Her world was bigger, more honest, and brighter than all the glass walls that surrounded his. As she moved away to greet other guests, Daniel stood frozen, stunned, feeling a discomforting certainty rise in his chest. He needed her in his life. Not as an employee, not as an impromptu translator, but as the woman who had already transformed his worldview forever. After Aria's speech and their brief meeting at the gala, Daniel Harrington couldn't get her out of his mind. In the days that followed, every meeting felt empty. Every business win tasted hollow. The glow that had once given meaning to his empire no longer satisfied him. Determined, he searched for a chance to speak to her. Far from curious eyes, Aria, however, didn't make it easy. She was busy with the social project she had created in her neighborhood. For the first time, Daniel crossed the borders of his world to find her there. A small, makeshift school inside a community center, where young people sang, studied, and learned musical instruments under her guidance. When she saw him walk in, Aria's eyes narrowed. The red dress from the gala had been replaced by simple clothes, jeans, a white shirt, her hair tied back practically. Yet her beauty remained undeniable, natural, radiant. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her tone cool and controlled. "What are you doing here?" Daniel took a breath, this time without the wall of arrogance he usually hid behind. "I came to speak with you. I need to apologize." Aria crossed her arms, her gaze like a stone wall. Apologies don't erase humiliation. They don't give back the nights I cried for being treated like I was guilty of something I didn't do. He stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. I know, I was wrong. The board's pressure blinded me, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I saw who you really are, Aria. And you're so much more than I ever imagined. She looked away, fighting the painful memory of walking out of that building with her head high, while her heart was in pieces. You only see me now because the world is applauding. Before, I was just a woman in yellow cleaning your hallways. Her words struck Daniel like blades, but he didn't flinch. His voice lowered, almost to a whisper. I know what it's like to lose, too. I lost my wife 5 years ago. She was the only one who saw me beyond the CEO, beyond the businessman. Since then, my life has been silence. A suffocating silence. You were the first person to break that. Aria looked at him, surprised by the confession. For the first time, she saw not just a powerful man, but a human being stripped of defenses. Don't say that to me, Daniel. Don't use your pain to justify what you did to me. He shook his head, anguished. It's not an excuse, it's the truth. Loneliness hardened me, made me blind. But when I saw you singing to your sister, when I saw you turning your pain into hope, I realized how small I was next to you. A heavy silence settled between them. Across the room, Aria's sister, Lily, watched discreetly, sensing the tension in the air. Aria took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. I can't just forget what you did. I'm scared, Daniel. Scared of opening my heart and being cast aside again when the corporate world starts talking louder. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. I don't want to live in a world where silence is my only companion. I want to learn to see life the way you do. I want to walk beside you, but I know I have to earn that. Aria's eyes welled with restrained tears. She stepped back slightly, fighting the whirlwind of emotions. Her heart was starting to open, but the pain was still too fresh to let him in without resistance. I don't know if I can believe you, Daniel. Not yet. He nodded, understanding, even with the crushing weight of her initial rejection. Then give me the chance to prove it. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Aria didn't reply. She just turned back toward the young people, calling her to resume their singing lesson. But before she walked away, she gave him one last look. A gaze caught between fear and the secret spark of an impossible love beginning to bloom. Daniel stood there, motionless, realizing that for the first time, he was no longer in control. And maybe that was exactly what brought him closer to her. The weeks that followed their reunion at the community center were filled with discreet meetings between Daniel Harrington and Aria Coleman. He kept reaching out, trying to show through actions, not words, that he was no longer the man who had condemned her without proof. She, torn between resentment and the flame growing within, allowed him near with caution, still guarded behind protective walls. It was during a rainy afternoon, in a company board meeting, that the unexpected happened. Daniel was in a video conference with international investors when the head of the digital security team, James Walker, rushed into the room holding a flash drive. Mr. Harrington, we found something that needs to be seen immediately, he said in a serious tone. Daniel paused the meeting and asked for the footage to be shown. On the screen appeared restored footage from the internal cameras on the night of the sabotage. The earlier recordings had been tampered with, but now, with the files recovered, the truth was crystal clear. Carla Davenport was seen clearly entering the file room after hours. She carried a folder and a laptop, Then she accessed the servers, copied documents, and deliberately scattered disposable cups and trash around to make it look like a cleaner had been there. Silence fell over the room. Daniel felt his blood run cold. My God. He muttered, bringing a hand to his mouth. James continued. She tried to erase these records, but we recovered them. The sabotage was entirely planned by her. Just then, Carla entered the room, unaware that she had already been exposed. "What's going on here?" she asked, using her usual tone. Daniel stood up slowly, his green eyes now burning. "What's happening, Sia Carla? Is that the truth has finally come out. You set Aria up. You destroyed the reputation of an innocent woman out of pure fear and jealousy." Carla turned pale, but tried to maintain control. "This is ridiculous. That footage could have been manipulated." James immediately responded, "No, Miss Davenport. We have the original files. They're indisputable." Daniel took a step forward. "You didn't just sabotage a company project. You stained the name of someone who never did you any harm, and I was complicit in your cruelty by believing you." Cornered, Carla dropped the act. "I saw the way you looked at her. Daniel, a maid. You were letting yourself be enchanted, and I wasn't going to let some stranger destroy everything we fought for." Her words echoed like poison through the room. Some board members covered their mouths, shocked by the revelation. Daniel clenched his fists, anger mixed with shame. "You didn't destroy Aria, Carla. You just proved that the real rot is right here, inside the glass walls we've always defended." Carla tried to leave, but security was already at the door. The board, in shock, began murmuring, and the accusations against her became inevitable. That same day, Daniel went looking for Aria. He found her at the community center, teaching a melody to a group of children. When she saw him, her gaze was cautious but calm. "Aria," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "The truth came out. Carla's been exposed. You were right all along, and I failed you." She slowly set down the music notebook. Her brown eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief, and the old pain finally met with justice. "I didn't want revenge, Daniel. I just wanted my name cleared. I just wanted dignity." He stepped closer, barely breathing, and that's exactly what you have. More than any of us. You have truth, strength, and a nobility I've never had. Aria, if there's still a place for me in your heart, I want to fight to earn the right to stand beside you." She remained silent for a few seconds, looking at him with a mix of tenderness and caution. Then she whispered, "I don't know if I can, Daniel. Not yet. But for the first time, I believe it might be possible." While the children laughed in the background, the tension between them lingered in the air like a taut string, ready to snap or turn into music. The scandal involving Carla Davenport still echoed in the press, but Daniel Harrington no longer cared about headlines or figures. What filled his mind and heart was Aria Coleman, the woman who had walked into his life like a beam of light in the dark. For weeks, he reflected on every word he'd said, every arrogant gesture that had hurt her, and realized that if he wanted to be by her side, he would have to give up the throne of pride he'd always sat on. That Saturday, the Rainier Valley Community Center was packed. Children ran around, teens rehearsed songs, and Lily, Aria's sister, laughed joyfully while learning new notes on the piano. Among them, Daniel appeared, not in a fancy suit, but in simple clothes, shirt sleeves rolled up, his gaze calm. The corporate elite wasn't there, just the community Aria had helped transform with her courage and hard work. Aria noticed him, and for a moment, her heart beat faster. But there was still hesitation. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" she asked, trying to stay firm. He took a deep breath and, instead of answering, stepped onto the small, improvised stage. He raised a hand for silence, and all eyes turned to him. "I've lived my life surrounded by glass and steel. I always thought wealth was in numbers, contracts, and buildings that bore my name. But I met a woman who taught me that none of that matters if it isn't shared. She showed me that dignity, love, and faith are riches far greater than any fortune." The crowd murmured, curious. Aria watched him, her heart torn between pride and fear. Then, in front of everyone, Daniel turned to her. His green eyes, paying, for the first time, held no arrogance, only humility. "Aria Coleman, I wronged you, I judged you, humiliated you, and allowed you to be hurt when I should have protected you. But I've also learned that love isn't about ownership, it's about partnership. Today, in front of your community, your sister, and these children who admire you, I want to ask for something I don't know if I deserve, but my heart begs for it." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside wasn't a flashy diamond ring, but a simple gold band, a symbol of something purer. "Aria, will you accept me not as a boss, not as a businessman, but as your equal? Will you be my companion, my partner, my wife? I want to walk beside you, learning every day the real meaning of love." Silence fell over the room. The children looked at each other. Lily covered her face, moved. Aria felt the ground disappear beneath her. Tears rolled down, not from pain, but from relief and triumph. She walked toward him slowly, every step marked by years of humiliation, now transformed into dignity. When she reached him, her voice trembled, but remained firm. "I'm not the invisible woman you used to overlook in the hallways anymore. Today, I'm someone who's learned never to bow to injustice. And it's as an equal, as a whole woman, that I say, yes, Daniel, I accept." The room erupted in applause and tears. Lily wept with joy. The children clapped, and Daniel, overwhelmed with emotion, knelt to place the ring on her finger. When he stood, Aria pulled him close, and for the first time, the two kissed, under the gaze of the entire community. It wasn't just a kiss of love, but of redemption. A silent promise that, from now on, dignity and truth would be the foundation of their lives. Daniel wept without shame, and Aria smiled with the serenity of someone who had triumphed. Life had taught them its most valuable lesson, that true love isn't measured by status, but by the ability to share pain, dreams, and hope. And so this story of love, resilience, and dignity comes to an end. But now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Leave a comment from 0 to 10. How much did this move you? If you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked another emotional story that's sure to touch your heart even deeper.